Hey guys, I want to share with you some info about the annotated bibliography so that you understand where we're headed with this unit and what your finished product needs to look like. So, real briefly, a bibliography is simply a list of sources. What you see here is a list of sources. This was the old version of your 20 source packet. Yours looks a tad different, but your 20 source packet is a list of sources, so that is a type of bibliography. What you see here is a works cited page, the kind of thing that you would put at the end of a more formal essay or research paper. There are maybe 10 or 12 sources on this works cited page, and you'll see that they're all in that very formal MLA style. We are going to use that, and I'll do a little review on how to do that accurately. So that is also a bibliography because it's a list of sources. Now, you learned this year in ICRW that to annotate means to add notes to something. So this is an example of adding notes to something. You've done this many times. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to combine a list of sources with the adding notes in a very formal way. So what you see on your screen here are a couple pages out of an annotated bibliography. Sorry. So what you've got here is a source, and that's the source citation right up here. So this is called The Ethics of Warfare, blah, blah, blah. And you'll see we did author, title, website, etc. So that's the citation for the source. And then below that source citation is my annotation. And it's one paragraph here, and it's another paragraph that starts right here. So for each of your sources, you're going to have a citation, and then you're going to have a 2-paragraph annotation. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what goes in those 2 paragraphs next. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at your 10 sources and you're going to pick 5. We used to use all 10, but this semester, since we are out of school and not face-to-face, Mrs. Brewer and I thought that we would reduce the length of this assignment a little bit to make this a little easier on you. So what you're going to do is take 5 of your sources, and you're going to use the Purdue OWL, or some of you like EasyBib, and you're going to create those MLA works cited entries. That's the source entry. That's how you're going to list your source. It's going to say author, it's going to say title, it's going to say website, etc. Now, after you've listed out in MLA style your sources, you're going to create that annotation. So those annotations are going to be 2 paragraphs long. The first one is going to be a paragraph summarizing the source. Now, we've done a lot of summarizing, so you know how to summarize a source. And the second paragraph is going to be a description of the source. So you're going to talk about the type of source it is, right? What kind of a website maybe. You're going to talk about how long the source was. And most importantly, you're going to talk about the source's credibility, meaning how do you know it's reliable? So you're going to have to think back, and we'll review a little bit about the ABCDEs of website evaluation. Remember, author, bias, currency, domain, and external verification are all ways that we can prove a source to be reliable. Some dates to keep in mind. Hopefully you finished your notes or you're highlighting and annotating on your 10 sources by Wednesday of this week. So that's the first due date you see here. Then by next week, Friday, which is the 3rd of April, I'd like to see 2 entries in your annotated bibliography, meaning you've created 2 citations, 2 MLA style works cited entries. And for each of those source entries, you're going to write 2 paragraphs. One is a summary and one is a description of the source. So if you're writing 2 paragraphs about 2 separate sources, that's a total of 4 paragraphs that are going to be due here. The reason why I want to do a check-in with 2 sources before you get too far is so that we can see if you're doing everything correctly, and if not, make some changes before you move on to the final finished product with all of your sources. The point values for this assignment are here on this slide. Having your 20 source packet completed was 20 points. Showing me your highlighted annotated 10 sources is 50. Taking notes on those 10 sources is exactly the same, still 50. End of next week, when you get those 2 sources into your annotated bibliography, that's just a completion grade for 20 points. And then the final with all 5 sources in there, or more if you want to, when you turn in that final draft, that's going to be 200 points. So that's the end of the slideshow. Now I'd like to walk you through this document here. Yep. All right. I think you can see this. So this is the document that I shared with you maybe yesterday that outlines what you need to do here. So I'm just going to scroll through this and point out anything that I want you to pay attention to. So you need to include 5 of your 10 sources. You are going to make sure that you use a variety of sources. This says at least 2 should be from a database. If you can even get at least 1 from a database, I'll be happy. Now, the annotation for each source has 2 paragraphs. You can see that here, paragraph 1, paragraph 2. Now, pay attention to let's see if I can do this. Yep. So for paragraph 1, you're writing a summary. Notice here it says that summary is 5 to 7 sentences. Notice that it reminds you to include author, title, and main idea. And notice that it reminds you about signal phrases. Remember, the author explains, the author points out, the author suggests. Those are your signal phrases, and you're going to bold those so they're real easy for me to find and for you to notice that you've done. So 2 to 4 bolded signal phrases in those paragraphs. Now, in the second paragraph, you're going to tell me type of source, length of source. How did you find the source? Like, what were you looking for? What did you type in? And then a brief assessment of the credibility using 2 of those A, B, C, D, E criteria. I will point those out again somewhere for you. Author, bias, currency, domain, external verification. Now, there are some guidelines to keep in mind about formatting, double space, Times or Arial, size 12. We're going to alphabetize your source entries by the first letter of the entry. So you might be using last name, or if your source didn't have an author, then you might be using the first word of the source. Make sure you've got a heading. Make sure you title it Annotated Bibliography. I gave you an example of this. Let's see, way down here. Here's an example, right? So you've got a heading, got your last name with a page number. Here's my title. Here's my first source, right? There's my source citation. And then I moved into these paragraphs. This is a good example of bolded signal phrases to remind you what those look like. It's also a good example of, here, we talk about this being a 2-page article. It's from a magazine. Here's how I found it. Here's what I was looking for. So this example will kind of show you what types of things you should be writing about. I actually included 2 of these entries back to back, or no, 3, just so that you could see what it will look like when you move into your next entry after you finish with your typing. What else of note up here? MLA, use Purdue OWL website. I'll create another video reminding us how to do that. I crossed all that out. I crossed all that out. So everything else was in that slideshow that I went over with you here. So I will share that with you as well. So that's a brief overview for what your annotated bibliography should look like. Let me know if you have questions and look for more information in the coming days. Cool. Thanks, guys.